Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for this super special edition of Picking Up the Pieces. I really can't believe that Griefhab is 2 today, and I'm super proud, and I could not do any of this without you. My guest, Dan, just arrived, so I am going to let him in and say hello. Hi there.
Hi, Sam.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I just started a second before to come on and say happy birthday to Griefhab and let the community know that it's a big deal and we wouldn't be here without them. So we're 2 today.
Yeah, two. Happy birthday. Wow,
Thank
that's
you.
amazing.
How was your exciting weekend?
My weekend was good. Actually, now that you ask, my boy got bar mitzvahed.
Yeah.
So it was quite a very exciting weekend. And I have to say, it went really well. Like, I actually had fun,
Yeah.
which you
Well,
don't expect with a family event.
so you say bar mitzvah, and I think of us sneaking out of the services, right? And only having fun at the party, right?
Yeah.
How were the kids?
The kids were great. We did not have a party. We had a dinner for the out-of-town guests, which pretty much added up to a party. So you
I
look
bet.
back and go, we might as well have had a party in terms of the money. And so the kids came to the service. We had a big Sabbath brunch. So it's a little different. Where we're from in Detroit, I don't know, a lot of Jewish people are joining us.
We have everyone, but
Right.
we started without introducing you, Dan, and I go back to our childhood days from Michigan, and we're both out of state now. So
Yeah. Right. So it was sort of a different type of event. The brunch out here on the West Coast is a big thing, whereas on the East Coast or the Midwest where we're from, it was more like I remember like pastry.
yeah,
So pretty much to sum up, everything seemed more expensive. Now, that's
I love it. In this day and age, the bar mitzvahs I see look like weddings,
uh-huh.
like super fancy. So I'm glad to hear you enjoyed it from the
Yeah.
parental perspective,
Mhm.
and that's what we're going to talk about today. Tell everyone who you are, what you do.
Okay. By the way, first of all, I have a small cough, so excuse me. Here in Oregon, we've got this cold that won't go away. So, pardon my coughing a little bit. My name is Dan Rothenberg, and I was a stand-up comedian from 1996 to 2009-ish. Then I went back to school, got my MSW, and now I work with youth. I've worked with youth in many different capacities. I started off with foster kids in Los Angeles, and about 4 years ago, I moved to Portland, Oregon, started a private practice working with teenagers and young adults. And now I've merged my practice into coaching, life coaching and academic coaching, because I feel like it caters a little more to my strengths. And I have this interest in, excuse me, trying to specialize in academic anxiety, procrastination, and all of because it's so rampant with kids. And I also want to work with parents. So I'm getting more and more focused and specialized. So I just changed my website from drothenbergtherapy.com, which, by the way, it seems so efficient and winds up, that's a long, difficult D Rothenberg therapy. Now it's oneyoucoaching.com, ONEYOU coach.com, oneyoucoach.com, where I lay out my program for resiliency coaching, academic coaching, bullying, and all the different things that coaching can target.
And let's
And
talk about why you made that switch. And you also include comedy, which I think is
yeah,
huge
I
because
try.
people have
Yeah.
this perception, Sam, do your clients really lay down on a couch and have to talk
Mhm.
about their childhood?
Yeah.
So I think it's important for people to hear your approach and know if you haven't experienced it, people
Mhm.
have really bizarre ideas of what we do. So you're
Yes.
just having natural conversations and being yourself.
Uh-huh. It is. I find, you know, when it comes to incorporating humor into a session, it's not that I'm telling jokes, or a lot of people, when I tell people that I use humor, there's an idea of, oh, that's kind of breaking the ice, which can be true, but it's just more of a general sensibility. Seeing the irony in things, making room for flexibility. So to me, humor largely is the ability to notice something, experience something, and if we can kind of see the humor in it, if we can kind of laugh, we're not being reactive. I mean, think about times of heavy stress or anxiety. I would describe those as humorless moments where you're just kind of, you have no other perspective than what those big feelings are telling you. And that's what I try to, for instance, work on with my mother when I hang out with my mother. And it's going better and better, trying to see the humor in it. I can always see the humor in it later.
Right.
Trying to feel the humor in it presently, trying to realize she's doing the best she can, and finding a communication where we can kind of give it back to each other instead of be angry at each other.
So
But
funny. My brother and I go through hiccups with my dad, and he had
Mhm.
something last year where he had some epiphanies and some ahas. And I went home for Thanksgiving and came back, and I was talking to my brother, and he was like, Sam, this is what I did 6 months ago. You have to. So he told me a story. It was about cream cheese. It's the stupidest thing. But
Uh-huh.
when my dad is pushing my buttons, I say to myself, cream cheese story, think about the cream cheese story
Uh-huh.
to
Uh-huh.
change my mood so that I'm less reactive and more able to just enjoy the relationship. And he does it with everyone. It's not just me. Like, this
Uh-huh.
is a story that,
That's right.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know what's tough, and I think this might go to a little of, I know I've listened to a lot of podcasts you've been on in your podcast talk about at times having to draw boundaries with people, and sometimes, am I correct, even cutting them out?
Oh yeah, yeah. I have no relationship with my in-laws since
Mm.
2020,
Mm.
and I am healthier, but still a struggle.
Mhm. When I work, a lot of young adults I work with, um, we talk about there's, a lot of times one of two ways to go. There's working on communication, and then there's boundaries. And a lot of times I think we have to choose boundaries, because this could sound sort of cynical, but some people are not going to change. And we can beat our heads against the wall, always trying to have the talk. Okay, we're going to talk this time. And sometimes that just doesn't work.
And there are people that don't respect the boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So working to keep them and recognize, like, aha, that's their behavior. I used to feed into it. Now I just hang up. That's
Mm-hmm.
my boundary.
That's good. I'm working on it too.
So
And
let's bring this to kids, because you said anxiety,
Mhm.
academics, and a lot of my population is struggling parents.
Mhm.
And they think, well, my kids will just come talk to me naturally. And you and I know
Yeah.
that they might about certain things, but their parents are the last people they want to talk to about these really crucial things at first.
Mhm.
So how can we help parents understand that no matter how amazing the relationship is, if something else is going on, they need someone to talk to. And if they're not talking to you, they need
Uh-huh.
someone.
Yes. Um, so you bring up a good point. So that's one reason to seek a therapist or a coach. Um, for instance, an academic coach can not only um, give a teenager kind of someone to talk to, but the ability to work on these important goals and objectives separate from their parents. I think parents, me included, we just tend to add anxiety when we don't mean to, because we bring expectations, and these are our kids. So it's when trying to be, this is something I do, and I'm actively working on how to pass this message on to the parents of the kids I work with, being aware of our own anxiety and our own control. I think parenting is an individual process for us as individuals, which is hard because we've got enough to deal with in life. And often we just want our kids to behave or do what's going to reach their goals and objectives, such as grades and all of that. But being aware that if I'm anxious and I give my child, and I sort of nag my child or tell my child to do something that is in his best interest, right? So he can feel like I'm doing the right thing. I'm helping him with his homework, or I'm telling him to do his homework, or I'm telling him to do this or that, taking a step back and going, okay, for instance, how many times have I said this today? Have I just repeated myself for the 4th time in an hour? That might mean this is a product of anxiety. How am I talking to my kid? Am I tense? Am I yelling? Am I raising my voice? Again, all those things we know. We were teenagers, right?
But are you being you? Because my clients are protecting their kids from their own emotions a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the kids do the same.
Yeah. And when you say the same, kids are hiding from their emotions or protecting their parents.
We're aware of what our parents are going through, right? Kids are sponges. So if I know my parents are overwhelmed, my clients aren't going to add to that. They'll go to someone else. So we have these parents with great relationships thinking they have all the information. I have a close friend whose son's grades changed, and she insisted to me, we talk, I know everything that's going on. And I said, well, something's going on. We're seeing change. So she took my advice, had him see someone. Turns out there was a major breakup that he was sharing with friends, but not with family for whatever reasons. And that we wouldn't have gotten there.
Right.
At their own pace. So we protect. We don't want to add stress to each other.
Absolutely. We don't want to add stress to each other. I would add to that, as kids, we don't want to be gaslit. So a lot of times we gaslight our kids because, let's be honest, what are we all going to say to our kid when they say, oh, I had a tough breakup? Let's do it all together.
We've all been through it.
It's okay. We've all been through it. There's so many fish in the sea, and our kids probably, that increases the anxiety because they're having these big feelings. So like you said, having someone to share these feelings and validate. I have an episode of my podcast called What Did I Say?, where I talk about the small T's, small traumas that our kids might be interacting with, that it's not complex trauma. It's not necessarily grief, serious grief, loss, sexual abuse, physical abuse, but experiences that can have a traumatic effect or loss of trust. And so, yeah, maybe our kid had a breakup. Maybe that breakup was hurtful. Maybe that breakup was your child's partner now partnering with a friend of theirs, which, by the way, think of what kids go through in high school. Let's go back to Berkeley High School. So,
right.
One big building housing everyone you're going to date, break up with, and then you go sit next to them in math. And now learn. There's no excuses, no mental health days back then.
And now in some places, I'm not a fan of Colorado's mental health. And what if the conflict's with a teacher, right? You
Mhm,
come home and you say, how often do parents minimize and say that like the teachers of you're just complaining?
mhm,
There are teachers that make mistakes and have
mhm.
need help working with certain students. So we do
Right.
tend to dismiss, and having another person that doesn't mean we're just patting kids on the back and saying you're right, but we're
Uh-huh.
listening
Yeah.
and then mediating that conversation with the parents. And I
Mhm,
let me tell you, clients that were kids who are now adults that I still connect with will laugh, but they will say, I called Sam when I was drunk at a party because I
mhm.
didn't want to drive home, but I wasn't calling my mom. I was letting her do that.
Right, right. Yeah, so kids don't wanna be kids don't wanna be lectured, they don't wanna be talked out of their feelings, and it still goes on with me and my parents, and my parents are great parents, but if I'm typically, if I'm being upset, I'm told to not be upset,
Yes.
and it's a tough one, and there's no magic answer, but I try to remind parents, your child's developmental level and need for autonomy is real. You know, we tend to kind of minimize that. Like, well, you're a teenager. I say up, you say down. Well, there's kind of a reason for that. It is time for them to individuate. And so one thing you can ask yourself is, okay, I'm going to take a step back. What am I about to say? Is it worth it? Am I going to push my kid away? Am I repeating myself? Am I tense? Am I trying to control my kid? So a lot of times there's this power struggle. Adolescence is this time developmentally of autonomy and independence, and parents want to hang on to that. And so you've got a power struggle. And a lot of times it's up to us. And I know it seems unfair. It's up to us to identify these things because our kids aren't going to. They're just filled with emotion and hormones. And I'm not talking about not taking responsibility or letting them do whatever they want, but communicate in a way that's respectful of these teenagers and young adults. And let me ask you, Sam, because this is a hard one. The idea of respecting our kids. Do you notice with parents you work with that there's a little bit of a presumed like authority? Like, I don't I don't need respect. My kid, he needs to respect me.
1,000%. That's just like the natural expectation. Same with even with a boss.
Mhm,
There are these power struggles, and if we can create a relationship, of course, one person does have a different position of authority, but we can
mhm.
still have mutual respect.
Yes, right, and I think teenagers, from what I see, from the youngsters I work with, are stressed and, um, feeling pressure, and their parents are triggering them, and they wanna be heard and respected and, talked to in a way that recognizes them as individuals. So, for instance, when we give a consequence that is just there to control, I think kids don't respond so well to that. They don't learn anything. So, here's an example. Um, a parent, a child, like their grades go down, and then you take their phone away, right? And sometimes it can sort of work because of just a Pavlovian response or just a very basic, kids will work to get that back. But at the same time, it's not necessarily, we want to work on how is this as respectful as possible, because a phone doesn't necessarily have to do with grades.
And kids are smart. No
Right.
matter what they're little sponges and they soak up and they know. My adolescent clients know the difference between a real conversation and a get out of my way, I'm busy, deal with your, right? Like they want us to be real with them. The truth is difficult, but they want it, and they know when we're BSing.
Right. And how would you, when you say BSing, give an example of what BSing is?
I mean, even just pretending I'm fine and in a great mood when I'm having a bad day and getting irritable with them. Like I have clients say like, oh my God, Sam, my mom listened to you. She said, I'm having an awful day. It's not you. Can we please put this conversation on the table until tomorrow? And it was like the greatest thing in this young adult's life, because every other time she thinks, what did I do wrong? You know, well, and I know something happened with you today, Mom, and you're trying to say I did something.
Yeah. I heard something that was revolutionary for me in an interview I did for my podcast. And basically, and I want to go back to the phone thing at some point, because that's a confusing one. Because phones do, actually, I'll hit that real quick. Phones do have to do with grades, and it is a big problem, being distracted by screens. But what I'm saying is, instead of just taking away a phone for an undisclosed amount of time, talking to your kid and figuring out, okay, how can we help you get your grades up? And maybe that involves the phone, trying to be as collaborative as possible. And it can really take some thinking out of the box. It could take, okay, we're all going to sit at the table and put our phones away now. And for 2 hours, I'm going to do my work. You're going to do your work. Whatever it is, trying to listen to them rather than just snatching something.
And a lot of times you'll hear, I understand I need a consequence, but my best friend is going through it right now, and I need to be able to be in touch with her. Well, then we can negotiate that.
Right.
But if we just take the phone, we don't know that we've now added anxiety to an emotional issue.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of times parents, without knowing it, become this just sort of authoritarian figure. Walking around, get off your phone. Like, that's actually disrespectful to just get off your phone. And usually we do that because we don't like the image of our child on their phone is disturbing. And we're just trying to bring our own anxiety down. But when when it's about my anxiety, it's going to be about your anxiety. So
I also was the kid with anxiety, and I was the kid with anxiety.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't know that, and I don't think you would have known that about me. Correct?
Not at all. In fact, I'm amazed anyone could know I wasn't anxious.
Had no clue, right? No clue. We were both, we had friends, we played sports, right? We didn't get traumatically bullied, right? But we both walked around. I had anxiety and no one knew, and it wasn't talked about. So looking back, we can't just assume that anxiety is the person visibly anxious. We were both high achievers. And my parents would have been the people to say, Sam is fine, if a teacher would have noticed it. So we also have to recognize that we're looking through our own lens, and we might not want to admit something that needs to be addressed.
Right. My child, for instance, is an amazing kid. He just, and by the way, you see where I'm going right now. You see the instinct. He's amazing. And that's because that's what we want to express about our kids. And it's true. He had an amazing bar mitzvah. He has some anxiety tendencies. And I'm trying to just recognize it, right? My son, out of nowhere, started kind of obsessively working out. And he does this thing where he works out. I recognize it in myself and in my dad a little bit. He's like, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. He's already checking those boxes off the day, like he's middle-aged already.
The overachieving anxiety.
Kind of. Yeah. The overachieving anxiety, the let's get this done anxiety. And I'm already trying to work with him on flexibility, psychological flexibility, adjusting. Like, okay, your entire family is in to see you for your bar mitzvah. You don't now might not be the time to prioritize a workout. People are here to see you. And I'm also trying to be aware, and I'm just doing my best to role model it and not make a big deal out of it, not get on him for it.
That's so huge because I never like you can pause, you can make an adjustment. I thought we just had to get back out there on the field, put a happy face on and get the next thing done. So it just even modeling that behavior and picking up on it. But my dad would insist, no, you were just ambitious. No, Dad, I was freaking out.
Yeah. And right. And right. My mom has said that before. Like, you were just anxious out of the womb.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's what she says. And of course, I'm looking for maybe some accountability for certain, just for our interactions. Yeah. So respecting that developmental level and communicating, it's important.
And I love that you mentioned boundaries earlier because we both have great families, great parents. We're close with them. That doesn't mean the boundaries get respected. My dad he will read my chapter that came out in Faces of Mental Illness about anxiety, and he called me to correct it. Like, no, that's not you.
Yeah.
It's harder for him to accept that that's really what I went through.
Yes, and I've been dealing with that a long time because I do stand-up comedy, not as much as I used to. So what do? I go up and talk about my parents and talk about my childhood. And I know it. My dad has said before, like, well, I understand you have to take creative license.
Right. We're exaggerating.
Yeah. I understand you have to exaggerate. That's the beauty of art, is it's my truth. And if you want to counter it with your truth, you get to do your own stand-up.
Right.
That's why you do your thing.
How do people find you? Do you only work with people in Oregon?
I work with people all over the country. If you're in Oregon or near me, I make an effort to do in-person sessions. If you want to, with coaching, I'm getting more and more creative with meeting people in the community, which is nice. Or I can meet at my office, or I still do predominantly Zoom virtual sessions after the pandemic. It's still so convenient. What about you?
People nearby, absolutely. We meet in person occasionally, but even then, weather, traffic, it's very convenient. And I think I told you last week or a couple weeks ago, I have less people rescheduling or needing to rearrange when it's online. So
right. So yeah, me too. I'm primarily virtual, but I can work with individual clients.
And just to clarify, will you, because you have the background in coaching and therapy, will you deal with why there is outside of just coaching and getting the grades back? Will you help figure out what trigger, like, what are we dealing with here? Where did this come from?
Yes, absolutely. No, so I advertise on oneyoucoach.com. I sort of advertise as taking therapy and coaching and blending them, which means coaching is taking the lead. But I have the therapeutic background, and my style is to just, I work with clients, I would say, that are just more functional than not. I'm not the greatest therapist. And these are the people I can refer to you, because you're so, you've got the chops for this. So I'm no longer working with, chronic PTSD and depression, because it just doesn't seem to play to my strengths. I really like the setting goals, and there's an element of mentorship. Ever since grad school, I've just really believe in a strength-based type of type of service, like type of therapy and coaching. And so what I talk about a lot is moving toward your values. Who are you? And how do you continue for the rest of your life to move toward what's authentic to you? And to me, that's a great definition of mental health. We are in psychological distress if we're moving away from our values.
Will you work with teenagers who have experienced a lot, some sort of a loss, uncle, parent, and it's affecting academics? Not so much mood, like
Mhm,
the ones that you would send to me.
mhm,
I have a lot of people in this community, particularly, who I want to recognize that even if everything looks fine,
mhm,
they might need someone to talk to, even just to bridge the gap. We have parents worry, a sibling that I
mhm,
have one coming to mind, and they would prefer a male.
mhm,
And we know you cannot lose a sibling and be fine,
mhm. Yes,
but you're not talking to me. Would that
right.
fit your
Yes, and that would fit. And I work with a lot of kids. I'm glad you mentioned that. Sort of like, how's he doing? He's fine. And he's not fine. I work with children of divorce a lot.
okay? Yes.
And that's a big one.
Yeah.
And I was like that as a child. You're fine, but you're not fine. So divorce is uh, on some level, there has to be grief and loss and sadness when it comes to losing your family.
Hmm.
Um, and I give, I give space for young people to have those feelings. And there's not always room for those feelings because there's a tendency to tell our kids, with really good intentions, okay, now we're moving on to something better. Now, sometimes, and I really suggest against this, sometimes we move on really, really quick and okay, this is going to be great. Here's your new siblings, Tyler and Marie, and we're going to move in with them and start a new life. And that's definitely a red flag. But regardless, kids, the one thing that in general is sort of unfair to kids is overall they present well, they look fine, and so it's hard. And at the same time, they're not old enough or necessarily mature enough to express what's going on with them. So yes, I work with kids, giving them the room for grief, loss, parental separation that they need, and at the same time continuing to move toward their goals.
I just wanted to clarify that because I think the people who could be watching are dealing with those things. And I
Yeah,
didn't want anyone to take away the message that you only deal with certain academics. Like obviously
right.
there are people who have had academic issues always and
Mhm,
struggle. But there are others that have an emotional or a situational issue happen that
mhm.
then impacts grades.
Right, and it's not just about, for me, grades are something I like to focus on because it's so at the center of a kid's life, and so their anxiety is gonna be wrapped up in that, but the goal is to allow them to find their own strengths and thrive in ways that the teenagers want to, and the irony is kids wanna do well. That's, I find, 99% of the time. Kids are kids are having difficulty because 'cause they're anxious, not because they wanna drop out of school.
And because they're being told 50 different things from 50 different people, there's
Right,
noise everywhere. And
right.
having somebody to validate or say, it's a great idea, and
Yeah,
just hear them. We don't do that in our own relationships. We come in, we're biased, we have our own stuff.
mhm.
Someone else doesn't. Your
Right,
child
right.
can get a conversation devoted to what they want and need. And we
Mhm,
don't intentionally stray from that.
mhm.
So it's a great way. Is it onecoaching.com or one coach? One coach.
oneyoucoach.com.
I'll put that in the conversation.
Mhm.
What else do you want to say to everyone? Should they know? This is great, you guys. I truly didn't know Dan had anxiety growing up, and he didn't know I did. And
I
that's
know, that's so funny.
I want you to pay attention to your kids, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, I want you to see more
Uh-huh.
and listen. I wasn't the girl who came home and said, I want to go to therapy. I didn't know that was an option. But there are kids who ask for help. Please
Uh-huh.
listen, because if they are
Yes.
using their voice and saying, I want to talk,
Mhm.
you can be their best friend. They need someone else. They're telling you.
Absolutely. Parents can have great relationships with their kids all through. I think exactly what you said. Listen and don't try to fix them. Let them have their feelings, and based on your knowledge of your kid, because still no one knows your kid like you. Really ask yourself, what does my child need? Even though it's not going to fix them immediately and make me feel better.
And it might make you feel a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely. My son, who I learn something new about him every day. He it was kind of funny. He does his Torah portion, and I have to say it was beautiful. I feel so blessed. My bar mitzvah was Did you go to my bar mitzvah?
Of course, but I might have been hanging out in the bathroom during
Okay.
your Torah
I
portion.
don't know if you remember. I almost lost it. I was almost the kid that walked off the bima.
Really? I
Oh,
don't.
I look back. I'm so grateful. I was this close. I was flubbing. I was flubbing. I remember. I was. Did you go to Temple Emmanuel?
Uh-huh.
Remember there was a microphone right on the bima. I had a book and I nailed the mic and I remember Casey Blackwell started. It, I freaked out. I almost started to cry because I was crawled inside myself. And
Look
looking back,
how traumatizing that is for us. No one else knew, right?
right?
That's the thing about anxiety. You were traumatized.
Yes.
We think we're glowing and like
Uh-huh.
have horns, and
Right.
no one knew. But that's what your kids could be going through.
Right. And I was in my mind, I thought, no, I was the one that everyone knows. I think people kind of did know. And I'm so proud of myself for holding it together. Because those are once in a lifetime things. You walk out of that room, that's done. That's
One of my dad's friends threw up. Like
right.
it happens. But
Mhm.
the story is no one else knew or cared. He's
Uh-huh.
still walking around like, oh my God, that was the worst moment of my life.
So Charlie gets off and it went really well and he enjoyed it. And Colleen and I did a tour. The speeches were good. He gets off and he'll be mad at me, but he won't see this. He starts crying out of emotion, just out of the beauty of it. And he's like, what is going on with me? And it's like he's getting emotional. And then he kind of is like, okay, that's enough. And later he had a real tough come down from it. So last night and the night before, he was just really sad. And because it was all ending and everyone was going home. And I had to stop. I just let him have his feelings. It was hard. I want to fix it. And I admit, toward the end, I was starting to get to that place of, all right, let's pull it together, enough. But I just kept it in.
Everybody comes in to celebrate you and then they leave. That
Yeah,
is for any age.
exactly. And even now that you say that, yeah, that's a reasonable reaction. It's a beautiful reaction.
Mhm.
But my parent head says, I don't want to look at this. And what if he's depressed forever now? And I'm literally in my head. I met a shrink 10 years from now going, it started at his bar mitzvah. He never recovered from it. And I just let him have his feelings. And yeah, maybe if it went on until the next week, 4 days later, then maybe we have to regroup and talk about it. But it's it's really hard. We don't want our kids to suffer. We want to, and like you said, we want to protect them from their feelings because it's too painful.
But they know.
Yes, they
They
know.
are smart enough, and they know we have feelings too. And they like my brother for the longest time, Sam, you can't cry around the girls. Okay, you like
Hmm.
you lost, you can't.
Hmm.
Okay, I cannot promise you I'm not going to cry. So,
Hmm.
are you going to let me see my nieces? They bring him up to me.
Hmm.
They talk. So it's my brother's fear of his girls not being able to
Hmm.
handle it. They're running up to me every single time with
Hmm.
stories.
Hmm.
So it's just letting them be who they are. If they said, "Why does Aunt Sam talk about Uncle Jim so much?"
Hmm.
Different.
Yes. That reminds me of something I was gonna mention. Revolutionary for me. My friend Trish Colcord runs Healing Solutions therapy in Lancaster, Palmdale, and I think now Santa Clarita, California. And I interviewed her, and she said she started to talk about role modeling the entire range of emotions for our kids, recovering. So she
Mhm.
said, I came, and Trish, like me, I mean, here's a secret of us therapists: we're basket cases.
All of us.
Totally. We're not, I'm not a good parent. I'm a certain type of parent
You're
with my mishigas, gonna send my kid to therapy for his because I'm like therapist dad, right? It's all just we're all trying our best. So this is what Trish said. She said the other day I came home from work. I had seen a couple of kids. I was in a tough spot. I was emotional. You know, we come home where we've taken all that in, all the trauma, all the stress. I came home and my son was expecting to do something with me, hang out with me. And I said, okay, I need a second. I'm going to go up. I'm going to take a bath and I'm going to probably cry. And then I'm going to feel a little better. I'm going to get it out. And then and then I'll come down and we'll do our thing. And I was like, whoa, that seems intense to me. I had never thought of it like, you're going to tell your kid you're going to cry? And yeah, we can roll as long as we role model the recovery
Mhm.
end of it. And that really changed the way I looked at parenting. I don't have to protect Charlie from everything. I had cancer twice. And I told him. And I let him see me. Fortunately for me, I'm in remission for the second time. But he got to see me be active and see me sort of handle it. And no, I didn't tell him everything and I didn't make life a downer. But the first time I got it, he was like 7. And my wife and I had a talk and we said, we have to tell him because he knows something's going on. And now he's free to create his own anxiety, he's going to fill in the blanks on his own. And so, right, we don't have to, we don't want to tell them everything, but we don't have to protect them from reality. I would almost assume your kid knows everything.
They respect you more if you're honest like that. They
Yeah.
really, really will. And they,
Hmm.
even if they don't know, okay, she's going to go take a bath and cry, they know there's something. They're
Yeah.
intelligent and they will come to people like me or Dan and say, my parents are BSing me.
Right.
They prefer, and we do have to show that recovery.
Yeah.
But we need to teach them that they're human and things affect us.
Yeah.
And then we learn how to work through it. I
Right.
didn't get that.
No.
For me, I attribute it to sports, like get back out there,
Right.
get back out in the court.
Exactly. And our parents didn't teach us that. It just that wasn't around then. So what we learned from our parents was more of a, you're a kid. I'm shielding you from this. You don't need to know why. Just be a kid. And it's not, and that's okay. But sometimes they need to know the truth. Even, and that doesn't mean I'm gonna parentify my kid and have him listen to my problems and make him responsible for. We keep that separation, but I can show him I'm handling this. I'm dealing with this.
Thank you so much for being so open and honest. I think
Mm.
that's one of the things that will make people reach out to you. There are those who think we aren't allowed to share personal things and we
Right.
can't take a call after hours. And so what I love is that you have the same approach I do. If
Mhm.
you are part of my audience, you know I don't refer to someone I don't trust.
Right.
So if you're looking for you or your kids, and I would say if there are kids that are resistant, parents can
Mhm.
get the work and start. And
Mhm.
kids can start, and that could end up being helpful for their parents. So please
Sure.
reach out to either one of us if you need Dan's information. I'll put it in the comments, but it is One You Coaching.
oneyoucoach.com.
I'll remember it by the end of the day.
Okay, it's all right.
Thank you, everyone,
We'll
for
get there.
being here for Griefhab Turning 2, and I will see you all next week.
Thank you for having me, Sam. It was great to see you again.
You too. I'm not sure if I'm hanging up on you or just